Olivia Carter had always believed that art was her destiny. Ever since she was a child, she saw the world through colors, brilliant shades that others often overlooked. At just 27, she had already established herself as one of the most promising young artists of her generation. Her paintings, rich with emotion and breathtaking color palettes, were celebrated in galleries, praised by critics, and sought after by collectors. But beyond fame and success, Olivia had something even more precious: love. Ethan Sullivan, a respected art critic, had been by her side for years. They met when Olivia was still a student at an art academy, and what started as admiration soon blossomed into romance. Ethan understood her art in a way no one else did. He saw her brilliance, encouraged her creativity, and always reminded her of her own worth. With him, Olivia felt like her life was a perfect canvas, every moment painted in vibrant hues of love, ambition, and shared dreams. They talked about the future often, about traveling to Paris for exhibitions, about opening a studio together, about building a life filled with passion and creativity. She had no reason to doubt their love, no reason to believe that the masterpiece of her life could ever be ruined. But perfection is fragile, and Olivia was about to learn just how easily a single moment could shatter everything. The night the accident happened, Olivia had just finished one of the biggest exhibitions of her career. The gallery had been packed, filled with admirers praising her work, journalists eager to interview her, and collectors discussing the value of her newest pieces. It was everything she had dreamed of. As she drove home, rain drizzled against her windshield, turning the city lights into blurry streaks of color. She was exhausted but happy, replaying the evening's events in her mind. She reached for her phone, considering calling Ethan to share her excitement, but before she could dial, the sound of screeching tires filled her ears. The next moments were a blur, a blinding flash of headlights, the sharp jolt of impact, the shattering of glass, the sensation of her body being thrown, and then, nothing. When Olivia woke up, she was surrounded by unfamiliar voices, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling her nostrils. Panic gripped her as she tried to open her eyes, but all she saw was darkness. "Miss Carter," a voice said gently, "you've suffered severe head trauma. There was significant damage to your optic nerves. I'm so sorry, but you've lost your sight." The words didn't register at first. Olivia shook her head. "No, that's not possible. I'm an artist. I need my eyes." "I know this is difficult," the doctor continued, his voice filled with sympathy, "but you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this condition may be permanent." Panic turned to devastation. Her world, once filled with light, color, and endless inspiration, had collapsed into absolute darkness. She clenched the hospital sheets, her breath coming in short gasps. She had lost her art. She had lost everything. Everything except Ethan. He had promised her forever, and in the overwhelming void of her new reality, she held on to the hope that he would be her light in the darkness. Days turned into weeks, and Olivia struggled to adjust to her new reality. Every day was a battle. Simple tasks like pouring a glass of water or walking through her apartment became overwhelming challenges. The colors she once loved had vanished, replaced by a suffocating void. But through it all, she held on to one belief: Ethan would be there for her. At first he was. He visited daily, helped her navigate her new world, whispered reassurances that everything would be okay. But slowly something changed. The calls became less frequent. The visits grew shorter, and when he was with her, there was a hesitation in his voice, a tension in the way he touched her. Then, one evening, he invited her to dinner at their favorite restaurant. Olivia, with the help of a friend, dressed carefully, choosing the same shade of blue Ethan once said made her eyes shine. She hoped tonight would be different, that he would remind her she hadn't lost everything. As she sat across from him, she sensed the change immediately. His breathing was steady but distant. The silence stretched between them. "What's the occasion?" she asked with a small smile, trying to ignore the gnawing unease in her chest. Ethan hesitated. Then, in a voice she barely recognized, he said, "Olivia, we need to talk." Her grip tightened around the edge of the table. "About what?" He sighed. I think we should end this." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her entire body froze. "End this?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Olivia," Ethan continued, placing his silverware down. "I can't do this anymore." A humorless laugh escaped her lips. "You promised me, Ethan. You said we'd get through this together." "I did love you," he admitted, "but things have changed." Her stomach clenched. "Because I'm blind?" He didn't answer, and in that silence, she had her answer. Tears burned in her useless eyes as she reached for his hand, one last desperate attempt to hold on to him, but he pulled away. "I met someone else," he confessed. "I'm getting married." The entire world seemed to stop. "No, that's impossible," she whispered, shaking her head. "You promised me forever." "I'm sorry, Olivia," Ethan said again, but the words felt empty. Then, without another word, he stood up and walked away. She listened to the sound of his footsteps fading, swallowed by the noise of the restaurant until they disappeared completely. Olivia sat there, alone, among strangers who continued their meals, oblivious to the way her heart had just been shattered. And for the first time since the accident, she truly felt like she had lost everything. Olivia didn't know how she left the restaurant. She only knew that her legs carried her forward, aimlessly wandering through the city streets. The places she once knew, the cafe she and Ethan used to visit, the park where she loved to sit and sketch, had all become unrecognizable. The cold night air bit at her skin, but she barely felt it. Her mind was numb. Her heart was shattered. She had lost her sight. She had lost Ethan. She had lost everything. The sounds of the city buzzed around her. Car horns, distant chatter, footsteps rushing past. But it all felt distant, like she was trapped in a reality she no longer belonged to. Then, suddenly, a blaring horn. "Watch out!" a deep voice shouted. Before she could react, strong arms grabbed her, pulling her back just as a car sped past, narrowly missing her. The force of the movement sent her stumbling, and she collapsed against the stranger's chest, her breath ragged. "Damn it," the man muttered, his heartbeat steady beneath her hands. "What the hell were you thinking?" Olivia tried to find her voice. I didn't..." She trailed off, realizing she didn't even know where she had been going. The man sighed. "Are you okay?" She nodded instinctively, but the truth was, she wasn't. The stranger must have sensed it because his grip on her shoulders didn't loosen. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. For the first time, Olivia registered the warmth of his presence, the steadiness in his voice. Who are you?" "Adrian Bennett," he replied. "And you?" "Olivia." "Well, Olivia," Adrian said, his voice softer now, "you need to get out of the street. Come on." She hesitated. This was a man she had never met before, but what did she have to lose? Nowhere to go, no one to call. So, against all logic, she let Adrian lead her away, unaware that this stranger would soon change the course of her life forever. Olivia had expected Adrian to simply call her a cab or leave her at a shelter. Instead, he took her to his home, a modern but sparsely furnished apartment that smelled of fresh linen and coffee. Everything about it felt unfamiliar, yet strangely safe. She sat stiffly on the couch, still trying to process everything, when Adrian placed a warm cup of tea in her hands. "Drink," he said. She hesitated before taking a small sip. "Why are you helping me?" Adrian sighed. "Because I can't." It wasn't the answer she had expected, but there was something in his tone, calm, unwavering, that made her believe he wasn't doing this out of pity. As the night stretched on, Olivia learned more about the man who had saved her. Adrian Bennett wasn't just anyone. He was a highly respected neurosurgeon specializing in optic nerve restoration, and when she told him about her blindness, he didn't react with sympathy or helpless sorrow like everyone else. Instead, he asked her a single question. "Have you considered surgery?" Olivia's breath hitched. "It's impossible," she said. repeating what every doctor had told her before. The damage is permanent. Adrian was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe for them, but not for me." Something in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Adrian continued, "that I can perform a procedure to restore your sight." For a moment, Olivia thought he was lying. No, she wanted him to be lying, because if there was even the smallest chance he was telling the truth, then hope, the thing she had forced herself to let go of, would come rushing back. "I don't understand," she whispered. Adrian leaned forward. "I've developed a new treatment. Corneal regeneration combined with nerve restoration. It's risky, but if it succeeds, you'll be able to see again." Her fingers tightened around the teacup. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for me?" Adrian hesitated. Then, in a tone so steady it made her pulse quicken, he said, "Because I need something from you in return." Olivia's stomach twisted. Of course there was a catch. "What is it?" Adrian exhaled slowly. "Not now. First we do the surgery. When you regain your sight, then we'll talk." A deal with a stranger. A man she barely knew, offering her the one thing she had lost. The one thing she never thought she could have again. Could she trust him? She had no other choice. Taking a deep breath, Olivia lifted her chin. "All right, I'll do it." A small smirk played at Adrian's lips. "Good. Then prepare yourself. In 1 week, I'll bring you back into the light." The days leading up to the surgery were filled with an unfamiliar mix of hope and fear. Olivia had spent so long trapped in darkness that the thought of seeing again felt like an impossible dream. But every time doubt crept into her mind, she heard Adrian's voice. Calm, steady, confident. He wasn't a man who made empty promises. On the morning of the procedure, Adrian guided her into the operating room. "This won't be painful," he assured her. "When you wake up, your eyes will be bandaged for a week. You'll need patience." Patience. She had been patient for a year. She could wait a little longer. As the anesthesia took effect, her last thought was a whispered prayer. Let this work. When Olivia woke up, everything was still dark, but this time it wasn't because she was blind. It was because of the thick bandages wrapped around her eyes. "Don't touch them," Adrian's voice warned as she instinctively reached up. "Your eyes need time to heal." A week. 7 days of waiting, wondering, hoping. Through it all, Adrian remained close. He checked her vitals, ensured she took her medication, and even sat with her in the evenings, speaking to her about the world she couldn't yet see. For the first time since her accident, Olivia felt something she hadn't in a long time: security. And then the moment arrived. Seated in Adrian's clinic, she felt his hands gently remove the bandages. Slowly, he instructed. "Open your eyes." Her heart pounded as she hesitated. What if it hadn't worked? What if she opened her eyes and saw nothing but darkness? Taking a shaky breath, she opened them. At first, everything was hazy, a blur of indistinct light and shadow. Then, slowly, the world sharpened into focus. The white walls of the clinic, the sunlight streaming through the window, the faint blue of the curtains swaying in the breeze. And then, Adrian. For the first time, she saw the man who had saved her. He was taller than she had imagined, his features sharp yet composed, but it was his eyes that caught her attention, intense, piercing, unreadable. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she choked out the words, I can see." Adrian didn't say anything at first. He simply watched her, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. Then, finally, he spoke. "Good." Olivia's chest tightened. This was the moment she had dreamed of, but a nagging thought loomed over her. She owed him now. Adrian seemed to sense her shift in emotion because his next words were spoken with quiet finality. "Now it's time for you to fulfill your end of the deal." Olivia swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" Adrian leaned back against his desk, his expression unreadable. Then, with unnerving calm, he said, "I need you to marry me." Silence filled the room. Olivia stared at him, convinced she had misheard. You what? You heard me, Adrian said evenly. I want you to be my wife. For 1 year. Olivia let out a breathless laugh, but there was no humor in it. Is this some kind of joke? Adrian's expression remained cold, unshaken. No joke. It's a simple arrangement. She shook her head. Why me? You don't even know me. I know enough, Adrian countered. I know that you have no family, no career to return to. I know that right now you have nowhere else to go. Olivia stiffened. He wasn't wrong, but that didn't explain why he needed her. Why do you need a wife? She asked, voice quieter now. Adrian exhaled slowly. Because I need custody of my daughter. His daughter? Adrian's jaw tightened as he continued. My ex-wife, Vanessa, abandoned our child years ago, but now she's back, and she's trying to take Emily from me. Not because she loves her, but because she wants control. The court favors stable families, and having a wife would strengthen my case. Olivia's mind reeled. She had expected Adrian to demand money, a favor, something simple. Not this. She took a deep breath. And what happens after a year? Adrian's lips curled into a smirk. Then we go our separate ways. You'll be free, and I'll have secured custody. It was absurd, insane, but Olivia knew one thing for certain. She owed Adrian more than she could ever repay. And maybe, just maybe, this was her way of thanking him. Slowly, she lifted her chin. All right, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. I'll marry you. Adrian studied her for a moment before nodding. Good, we'll make the arrangements immediately. As he turned away, Olivia exhaled shakily. She had stepped into a deal she didn't fully understand. And something told her that by the time this year was over, nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The wedding was quiet, almost transactional. No grand gestures, no romantic vows, just a simple exchange of rings before a judge. Adrian remained composed, treating it like a legal matter rather than a union. Olivia, despite knowing this was all temporary, couldn't shake the feeling of unease. When they arrived at Adrian's home, a sprawling estate much larger than she expected, Olivia realized she wasn't just stepping into a marriage of convenience. She was stepping into a family. Emily, Adrian's 6-year-old daughter, was waiting for them. She had curly brown hair and wide, curious eyes. You're my new mommy? Emily asked, tilting her head. Olivia hesitated. I suppose so. Emily studied her for a long moment before nodding. Okay. Then she pulled a small stuffed rabbit from behind her back. You can have this. It helps me when I'm sad. Something in Olivia's chest tightened. She knelt down, brushing a curl from Emily's forehead. Thank you, sweetheart. Emily beamed, and Olivia knew this little girl was going to change everything. Days turned into weeks. At first, Adrian kept his distance. He was polite but detached, treating Olivia more like a business partner than a wife. But she noticed the little things. How he made sure she had her favorite tea, how he lingered for a second when their hands accidentally brushed, how his gaze softened when he watched her with Emily. And then there were the nights. Sometimes, Olivia couldn't sleep. She would sit by the fireplace, lost in thought, and somehow, Adrian always found her. You should rest, he murmured one evening. She sighed. It's hard to sleep when your entire life changes overnight. For once, he didn't have a cold, logical response. Instead, he sat beside her, staring into the fire. I know the feeling, he admitted. It was the first time she saw the cracks in his armor, but just as Olivia started to let her guard down, the past returned. One morning, as she was picking Emily up from school, she heard a voice she never wanted to hear again. Olivia. She froze. It was Ethan. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as she turned to face Ethan. What do you want? She asked, keeping her voice steady. I made a mistake, Ethan said. I should never have left you. She scoffed. You left me when I lost my sight. Now that I can see again, you suddenly regret it? I still love you. The words made Olivia freeze. But not because she believed them, because she didn't, not anymore. Before she could respond, another voice cut through the air. Olivia. She turned to see Adrian standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable. His eyes flicked from her to Ethan, darkening. Ethan smirked. Does he know, Olivia, that this marriage isn't real? He turned to Adrian. She needed you for her sight. You needed her for custody. That's all this ever was, wasn't it? Adrian's jaw tightened. Olivia clenched her fists. Ethan, stop. But the damage was done. Adrian's face was carefully blank, but she could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Later that night, when Olivia tried to talk to him, he was cold, distant. Do you regret marrying me? She finally asked. Adrian hesitated, and in that silence, she had her answer. A sharp pain twisted in her chest. Without another word, she turned and walked away. This time, before he could. The days that followed were cold and distant. Adrian buried himself in work, and Olivia convinced herself that maybe this was how their story ended. Then, one evening, a knock at her door. She opened it to find Adrian standing there, his usual composure gone. His eyes, filled with desperation, locked onto hers. I know the truth, he said. Ethan and Vanessa set you up, and He exhaled sharply. I let them win. Olivia's chest tightened. So now that you have proof, you suddenly believe me? No. He took a step closer. I should have believed you from the start. Tears burned in her eyes. You hurt me, Adrian. I know. His voice dropped to a whisper. But I love you, Olivia. Her breath hitched. I don't know when it happened, but losing you felt worse than anything I've ever experienced, and I don't want to spend another day without you. She hesitated, then reached for his hand. Then don't. Adrian let out a shaky breath before pulling her into his arms. And for the first time, Olivia knew this wasn't just a contract anymore. This was real. Months later, as they decorated the Christmas tree with Emily, the little girl suddenly turned to Olivia with hopeful eyes. Can I call you Mommy now? Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes as she knelt beside Emily. Only if that's what you want, sweetheart. Emily grinned. I do. Adrian watched them, his heart full. He reached for Olivia's hand, squeezing it gently. This wasn't an arrangement anymore. This was family, and it was forever.